On a cold Monday morning in Charlotte, North Carolina, Sarah Mitchell, 39, walked out of the family courthouse carrying a single cardboard box. Inside were a few family photos, an old laptop, and the framed certificate she'd earned years ago with honors in business management. It was all that remained of the life she'd spent 15 years building. Her husband, Daniel, had just finalized their divorce. He kept the luxurious house. He kept the luxury SUV. He kept the successful logistics company they had built together. And Sarah, she walked away with almost nothing. As she stood on the courthouse steps, Daniel adjusted his expensive suit and smirked. "I told you years ago," he said. "You were never the brains behind the company." Sarah didn't answer. She simply picked up her box and walked toward the city bus stop. The people passing by had no idea that the woman sitting quietly on the bench had once worked 16-hour days helping build one of the fastest-growing transportation companies in the state. Every client relationship, every hiring decision, every marketing campaign, she had helped create them all. But because the company had been legally placed under Daniel's name years earlier, she left with none of it. Sarah rented the cheapest apartment she could find. The living room became her bedroom. The kitchen table became her office. Every night she stared at unpaid bills spread across the table. She had less than 2 months of savings. Finding another executive job wasn't easy. Potential employers looked at her resume and asked the same question. If you helped build such a successful company, why aren't you still there? Sarah smiled politely every time. The company and I went separate ways. She never spoke badly about Daniel. She refused to let bitterness become her identity. To pay rent, Sarah accepted a temporary customer service job at a small shipping warehouse. The pay was barely enough, but something caught her attention. The warehouse struggled with deliveries, scheduling, and client communication. Within days, Sarah quietly suggested a few improvements. The owner, an honest man named Michael Brooks, noticed immediately. "Have you done operations management before?" he asked. Sarah laughed softly. "A little." Within 3 months, customer complaints dropped dramatically. Profits started rising. Michael couldn't understand how someone so talented had ended up answering customer emails. One afternoon, he asked her directly, "What really happened?" Sarah looked out the warehouse window. "I helped build someone else's dream." She paused. "Now it's time to build my own." That evening, Sarah opened a fresh notebook. Across the first page, she wrote 6 words that would change her life. Never build without owning your future. She decided to launch her own logistics consulting company helping small businesses improve shipping, operations, and customer service. She had no investors, no office, no employees, only experience and a determination stronger than she'd ever felt before. She didn't know it yet, but 5 years later, the company that had once thrown her away would be fighting to survive. And the woman they underestimated would return, not for revenge alone, but to rewrite history. Sarah launched Mitchell Logistics, solutions from the tiny kitchen of her 1-bedroom apartment. Her office consisted of an old folding table, a secondhand laptop, and a borrowed printer. She couldn't afford employees. She answered every phone call herself. She met clients herself. She even cleaned the office, which was really just her apartment, before every virtual meeting. Most people said no. Some business owners looked at her website and politely declined. Others never returned her calls. One man laughed and said, "If you're so good, why aren't you still running your husband's company?" The words stung. But instead of arguing, Sarah smiled. "One day you'll know why." She crossed his name off her list and knocked on the next door. After nearly 3 months of rejection, a struggling family-owned trucking company agreed to give her a chance. Their deliveries were constantly late. Customers were leaving. Expenses kept rising. "If you can save this business," the owner said, "I'll recommend you to everyone I know." Sarah worked day and night. She redesigned delivery routes, introduced tracking software, trained dispatchers, and improved customer service. Within 6 months, delivery times improved by 35%. Customer complaints dropped dramatically. The company posted its first profitable quarter in nearly 2 years. True to his word, the owner recommended Sarah to everyone he knew. Soon, one client became 5, 5 became 20, 20 became 50. A year later, Sarah hired her first employee, a young single father named Ethan, who had been unemployed for months. "I don't have much experience," he admitted during the interview. Sarah smiled. "Neither did someone who once believed in me." She hired him on the spot. As the company grew, Sarah made one promise. "No one here will ever be treated as disposable." Employees were paid fairly. Ideas were welcomed. Success was shared. The workplace became everything she had wished for during her marriage. One evening, while reviewing financial reports, Michael Brooks walked into her office with a newspaper. "You should see this," he said. The business section featured a troubling headline: "Mitchell Freight Solutions faces major financial losses after losing key contracts." It was Daniel's company. Sarah stared at the article in silence. She felt no joy, no satisfaction, only surprise. Michael looked at her. "Do you think they'll recover?" Sarah closed the newspaper. "I don't know. But I do know one thing. The company wasn't built by one person." She returned to her work, unaware that fate was preparing a moment no one could have imagined. Within the next 3 years, Sarah's company would become one of the fastest-growing logistics firms in the Southeast. And the man who once claimed she was never the brains behind the company would soon be forced to make the hardest phone call of his life. 3 years passed. Mitchell Logistics Solutions had grown far beyond Sarah's expectations. What had started at a folding table in a tiny apartment now occupied 3 floors of a modern office building in Charlotte. Her company managed supply chains for hundreds of businesses across the Southeast. More than 180 employees worked for her. The same woman who once struggled to pay rent was now invited to speak at national business conferences, but Sarah never forgot where she came from. Every new employee heard the same message on their first day: respect people. Businesses succeed because of people, not because of buildings. One Monday morning, Sarah's chief financial officer rushed into her office. "You need to see this." He placed a confidential financial report on her desk. Daniel's company, Mitchell Freight Solutions, was in serious trouble. Years of poor management, risky investments, and losing major clients had pushed the company to the edge of bankruptcy. Banks were refusing additional loans. Suppliers wanted immediate payment. Several competitors were already preparing bids to buy the company. Sarah quietly closed the file. For a long moment, she said nothing. The office was silent. Finally, she looked up. "Set up a meeting." Her executive team exchanged surprised looks. "You want to buy them?" Sarah nodded calmly. "If someone else buys it, hundreds of employees could lose their jobs. I'm not doing this because of Daniel. I'm doing it because those workers deserve another chance." A week later, Sarah walked into the same corporate headquarters she had left 5 years earlier with nothing but a cardboard box. Everything looked familiar. The marble floors, the glass conference room, the company logo she had once helped design. Even the receptionist recognized her. "Welcome back, Ms. Mitchell." Sarah smiled politely. "It feels strange hearing that again." Inside the boardroom sat Daniel and the remaining executives. He looked exhausted. The confidence he once carried had disappeared. His expensive suit couldn't hide the stress on his face. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. Finally, Daniel broke the silence. "I never imagined we'd meet like this," Sarah replied softly. "Neither did I." The lawyers presented the numbers. Mitchell Logistics Solutions had submitted the strongest acquisition offer. If accepted, Sarah would become the new CEO of the company she had once helped build. Daniel looked down at the papers. Then at Sarah. "I owe you an apology." The room became completely silent. "I spent years convincing myself that your success came because of me." He lowered his head. "The truth is, much of mine came because of you." Sarah didn't celebrate. She didn't smile with satisfaction. Instead, she simply said, "This isn't about proving you wrong. It's about giving this company a future." Daniel slowly signed the agreement. With one signature, ownership changed forever. The woman who had once been told she was worth nothing now owned the very company that had cast her aside. But Sarah's biggest decision was still ahead, and it would leave everyone in the room speechless. The acquisition was finalized on a quiet Friday afternoon. For the first time in 5 years, Sarah walked through the front doors of the company, not as an employee, not as a partner, but as its new chief executive officer. Hundreds of employees gathered in the lobby, whispering to one another. Many remembered her. Some had worked beside her years earlier. Others had only heard stories about the woman who helped build the company from the ground up. As Sarah stepped onto the stage, the room fell silent. She looked at the familiar faces and smiled. "I'm not here to celebrate buying a company," she began. "I'm here to save the people who built it." The room erupted into applause. Over the next few days, executives waited nervously. They assumed layoffs were coming. Most companies that purchase struggling businesses cut costs by firing employees. Instead, Sarah did the opposite. She announced that no hardworking employee would lose their job because of the acquisition. "We're going to rebuild together," she said. "We don't fix companies by throwing people away." Employees were stunned. Many broke into tears. One warehouse supervisor who had worked there for 22 years approached Sarah after the meeting. "My wife has cancer," he said quietly. "I thought I was going to lose my job and our health insurance." Sarah gently placed a hand on his shoulder. "You won't. Go home tonight and tell your wife you still have both." The man couldn't speak. He simply hugged her. Sarah then made another announcement that no one expected. She was creating an employee ownership program, allowing long-term workers to earn shares in the company. "I know what it feels like to help build something and walk away with nothing," she told them. "I'll never let that happen to anyone here." The room stood and applauded for nearly 2 minutes. A week later, Daniel requested one final meeting. He entered Sarah's office carrying a small cardboard box. Inside were old photographs from the early days of the business. There was a picture of the two of them packing shipments in a tiny warehouse. Another showed Sarah sketching the company's original logo on a napkin. Daniel looked down. "I spent years taking credit for work we did together." He slid the photos across the desk. "These belong with you." Sarah looked at the pictures for a long moment. Then she smiled, not with anger or pride, but with peace. "We can't rewrite the past," she said, "but we can choose what we become because of it." Daniel nodded. "I hope one day people remember you as the woman who saved this company." Sarah looked out the window at hundreds of employees arriving for work. "I'd rather they remember that someone finally believed in them." 5 years earlier, she had walked away with nothing but a cardboard box. Now she had rebuilt not only her own life, but the future of hundreds of families. One final chapter remained, a moment. That would prove her greatest achievement had never been buying the company. It had been becoming the kind of leader she once needed. 1 year after the acquisition, Mitchell Freight Solutions looked nothing like the struggling business Sarah had inherited. The warehouses were modernized. Employee turnover had dropped to its lowest level in company history. Profits had returned. More importantly, the company had become one of the best places to work in the region. Business magazines praised the remarkable turnaround. But when reporters asked Sarah what she was most proud of, she never mentioned the numbers. Instead, she said, "The balance sheet tells you how a company is doing. The people tell you who you are." On the 5th anniversary of her divorce, Sarah walked back to the courthouse where her old life had ended. She carried the same cardboard box she had left with years before. Only this time it wasn't filled with loss. Inside were the framed certificate, the faded notebook, and a copy of the company's annual report. She sat quietly on the courthouse steps and smiled. An elderly janitor noticed her. "Everything okay?" he asked. Sarah laughed softly. "More than okay. 5 years ago, I left this building believing I'd lost everything." She looked up at the sky. "It turns out I had only lost the life that was holding me back." A few months later, Sarah launched the Second Start Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to helping divorced women rebuild their careers. The foundation offered free business training, legal guidance, career coaching, and small startup grants. Applications poured in from across the country. One morning, a woman named Lisa arrived for an interview. She looked nervous. "My husband left me 6 months ago," she admitted. I don't even know where to begin. Sarah smiled because she saw herself in Lisa. She opened a drawer and pulled out the old notebook that had carried her through every setback. Its pages were worn, its cover faded, but its message was timeless. She handed it to Lisa. I wrote my dreams in this notebook when everyone thought my future was over. Lisa hesitated. I can't take this. Sarah nodded gently. You can. The next chapter belongs to someone else now. Tears filled Lisa's eyes as she hugged Sarah. That evening, Sarah stood in the company lobby after everyone had gone home. She looked at the wall displaying the company's history. A new plaque had recently been installed. It read, Leadership is not measured by what you own, but by how many people rise because you believed in them. She ran her hand across the engraved words. The little cardboard box she once carried away in defeat had become a symbol of something far greater. Not revenge, not wealth, not even success. It represented resilience. As she switched off the office lights, Sarah whispered the words she wished every person starting over could hear. Someone may walk away from you. They may underestimate you. They may even take everything you helped build. But they can never take your knowledge, your courage, or your ability to begin again. She locked the door behind her and stepped into the evening with a peaceful smile. Because she had learned the greatest lesson of all. The best revenge isn't destroying the people who hurt you. It's building a life so meaningful that you no longer need revenge at all. The end. If this story touched your heart, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who believes that honesty, kindness, and integrity still matter. Together, let's spread stories that inspire the best in all of us.